Climbing is a sport of failure, and you fail a lot, maybe 90+% of the time you're falling. And what that does to me mentally is I think it trains me to really accept failure as a part of the process.
I am so excited to welcome a total trailblazer, the OG millennial influencer climber, Sasha, you're not my boss, DiGiulian, to the show. Thank you for making the time. What's up, girl?
Hey, Lisa, how's it going?
So you're joining us just after finishing your promo tour right now, aren't you?
Just finishing the film tour for Here to Climb. Yep. And book tour was released last fall. So I finished that out last fall as well.
And I obviously did watch your documentary, which was really, really cool. How was it for you getting all, the footage in and putting it into a story that represents yourself?
Here to Climb came to life over about 4 or 5 years of filming. So, really working with the team, it was an incredible experience. Everyone was so diligent through the archival content as well as just capturing the in the moment, telling the story about my past and my present, chronicling what I went through massive injury and come back. And it was really an honor to work with everyone on the crew. They were fantastic.
And in case anyone has not watched it yet, you should definitely go check it out on redbull.com. Here to Climb, really a huge recommendation. And you said in one part that climbing is really a mental sport. What do you mean by that?
Climbing is a really mental and physical sport. I always say that the mental game needs to be just as strong, if not stronger, than the physical, because it's like a live interactive jigsaw puzzle. When you're going to a climb, you're looking up at this blank cliff and you're trying to figure out the sequences and the ways in which you can put all of these seemingly disparate aspects of a rock wall together in your mind. And then you're challenging your physical body to actually do them. And I think that, like in most sports, mental components of just having a strong mind enables you to think outside of the box and be more creative, as well as assess risk and manage it and operate as safe as possible while in extreme conditions.
One thing that really struck me as well is you said every time you climb, you fall and fall and fall. What does that do to you, and how do you, keep coming back, keep pushing harder?
Climbing is a sport of failure, and you fail a lot, maybe 90+% of the time you're falling. And what that does to me mentally is I think it trains me to really accept failure as a part of the process. Sometimes we look at progress as this linear expectation of progressing every single day and you showing up to training and then expecting results. You don't always have that. Sometimes you have regression before you have progression. And through the act of consistently falling in my sport, I think that I've learned how to get back up time and time again. It's kind of like that proverb, fall down 7 times, stand up 8. I think that that's what's beautiful about climbing in general is you learn to expect that if you're not falling and if you're not failing, you're not pushing yourself hard enough.
And I mean, it does sound really nice and poetic hearing you say it like that. And knowing that you started out climbing indoors, I can imagine that falling and failing 90% of the time, is all right and more, just the mental part. But you moved to climb outdoors now. And I can imagine that you can't afford falling and failing that many times out on the open wall, right?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about climbing is it's a sport about knowing your gear when you're climbing outside and knowing how to trust it and knowing what all of your gear is rated to, as well as understanding the way in which you can push it. And so when I'm climbing outside, similar to climbing inside, there is risk that's involved, but there's also understanding the areas where if I'm climbing a really technical, challenging wall that has quote unquote no fall zones, and that's areas that we've designated as high risk scenarios of falling, then I think that that mindset shift just has to happen where like in business, like in a lot of aspects of life where you have no fall zones, where it's like, okay, I know I can't mess this area up, but I know I'm not going to because of the preparation and due diligence that I've laid out ahead of time. And so I think that that's where that beautiful mind body collision happens as well, is like being so dialed in and being so trusting of what you're capable of that you can't allow doubt to surface, and controlling that doubt and controlling that mentality of like, I can do this and I'm going to do this because and that's what I'm mentally set up to achieve.
And I mean, obviously, you do the due diligence regarding your equipment and everything, but then the human factor always comes in and always holds some surprises. How do you set yourself up mentally like that?
I think that the training that goes into professional athletes in general is something that's like we don't see as much of the background of, and that's what I was really excited to capture as well in Here to Climb, is like showcasing that you don't just show up and appear like we see in Instagram photos. Like we get the gloss there, we get the beyond the facade of I mean we get kind of like that facade, and I think that when people are in their daily life and training, the way that I do it is both physical and mental training. I mean, I work with sports psychologists as well as a therapist, as well as just going off of my own experience of knowing what I need. And to say that it's always an easy, frictionless road too is not my case either. Like I have good days and I have bad days. And I think that the mental struggle is always, as an athlete, one of the most challenging aspects of the sport. Um, but performing under pressure is also something that we hone into and calibrate ourselves in order to really be able to shine in those moments.
Sasha, can you take us to the wall for a moment? Because as I was watching your documentary, I was like, I don't know, struck while looking at these pictures of yourself on this huge wall, just, like hanging there with one hand, looking up, like trying to figure out the next move. What are you thinking in these moments? You just have this seemingly flat wall right in front of you, and you have to find a little inch to pull yourself up.
It kind of depends like what climb I'm on and what the struggle has been for what I'm thinking. Sometimes it's just pretty carefree and like I'm on the wall doing what I love to do with a climbing partner and having a blast. Then sometimes I'm really physically struggling. Like on the climb here to logical progression, which is in the film, I went to it 5 weeks after my final hip surgery. And in many accounts, I wasn't necessarily ready. And I really went through the struggle live time on the wall in front of the cameras of showing up to something that maybe I wasn't as physically prepared to do, but mentally I was so set on the fact that I needed this for myself and I needed it to go straight to the nucleus of where my fear was manifesting. And over the course of my 5 surgeries over 18 months, it was the point at which I was being held back mentally the most. And as a part of my physical and mental, I guess, like comeback in that journey was really inclusive of going and doing that climb. And so when you see those shots of me hanging there on the side of the cliff, to your question of like, what am I thinking? In some of those scenes, like I'm really suffering and I'm in a lot of pain. And I'm wanting something so bad mentally and trying to will my body physically to accomplish it.
That is wild. And I mean, it was also wild seeing you getting both hips operated in, your prime basically, and you really wanting to hit this huge next project of yours. And you just said, if I understood that correctly, that the mental part of this whole process was a really big one as well. Did you do certain, I don't know, tasks or exercises mentally? Did you learn new tools, how to train your mind?
I worked with two really incredible sports psychologists, one being Eric Potterat from the Red Bull High Performance Center, as well as Suzu Cornella, who runs a private practice called Summits of the Mind. And we really focused on going to the points of where I had the most friction and I had the most kind of created scenarios in my mind of if this, then that, and that's going to like result in whether it's fatality or whatever it was, because I was coming off the heels of a tragedy happening to one of my team members and then taking off essentially just under 9 months off of my sport and not doing it. And so all of these feelings that had manifested in my mind became my reality. And we create that reality for ourselves. And I think that Lynn Hill has this great line in the film that is, the story that we tell ourselves is the story that matters the most. And so I think to the point of like what practices, I did a lot of visualization because I wasn't doing my sport. Like working on visualizing myself doing it helped me a lot with even just awakening the muscles that were dormant. Breathing exercises. I always say, like, I could always do more meditation because I'm a really fast moving, impatient person. And so working on patience, both like on the climb, but also just like beyond the climb, has always been something that I try to work on, but it's something I could improve on.
Could you tell me more about the breathing exercises? Because I have lately done this incredible breathwork session. It was, I don't know, I think it was a 60-minute slot even. And what we did for the entirety of this session was breathe in into your stomach and then into your chest and then breathe out. And it was the craziest experience for myself. Did you do this type of breath work, or what did you guys focus on?
Oh, that's amazing. So would you do the same length of breaths for the full hour, like the same cadence?
Yes. Yes, it would be stomach, chest out, stomach, chest out. It was crazy.
We actually did this Red Bull High Performance Camp in Montana a couple years ago, and Wim Hof came, and it was one of the highlights of my experiences there because we had something similar that was like an hour long, very out of body experience for me, like of just breathing. Like we were lying on the floor doing these like super intense breathing exercises, and I felt like at one point, like my body had kind of levitated above me from the floor, which was wild. It sounds like maybe you had a similar experience.
That's crazy. Did you do anything like that with your coaches in the, regarding the hip surgery recovery?
Yeah, I do a lot of box breathing, which is something that works really well for me. And that's like 4 counts and 8 counts of just like breathing in, holding at the top, and then breathing out, holding at the bottom, breathing in, kind of like that similar, like if you think about like a square box, you can think about each breathing, hold and release is like the corners of a box. And it works quite well for me because it's something that I can even do like with my watch, like just looking at the seconds and then kind of just like close my eyes and get into that zone. And it's not a crazy number to be counting up and down to. And that's kind of part of that like meditative process. And even if you do like 4 or 5 minutes of just like box breathing, focused attention, I think that it can really help calm your mind down and clear it as well. And it's 5 minutes, like we all have. I think that the debunking of rituals comes down to like realizing how quickly certain things take. And sometimes, like, if I really don't want to do something, I'll just be like, I'm just going to count like how long it takes me to go and like do this thing. And then you just set a watch and you're like, did 5 minutes of meditation and I feel so much better. It's like the cost versus reward on your schedule is very minimal.
Would that be something you would do while on a climb, or is that something you would do in preparation?
Normally in preparation, though, you have a lot of time sometimes when you're hanging out on a wall waiting for like the sun to leave it or the rain to stop. You can't really climb in the rain. It makes the rock really slippery. And then if you're climbing in the sun, then the rock gets really hot and it can also be detrimental to performance. So there's definitely times when you're on the wall that that are like waiting periods of time, which is where I guess like the patience of just waiting it out can be really challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine. And as you're describing this, you're just taking me back basically to this one scene in the documentary while trying to climb El Gigante with your partner, Vian Charbonneau. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And you guys were, trying to figure out how to proceed. It was super hot. You couldn't really grab the rock. And that, made me wonder now about the importance of picking the right partner for, endeavors like the ones you're doing. And that was also a big part in your story. You used to climb with guys on a regular basis until there was like a cut, and then you decided to go with, I guess, female climbers only. How did that come about?
I still climb with plenty of men, and I find that it really comes down to what you said, choosing the right partner. And what was a really incredible moment was I was going to do this like 2 month long project in the Canadian Rockies called the Trilogy. And I had planned it with someone who happened to be an ex boyfriend of mine. And for obvious reasons, it meant that going and doing like 3 big walls together was a horrible idea, to the
Yeah.
point at which I was like, "I'm gonna go and do this project because 'cause I've been training for it, and this is what I, have made my summer plans to, like, go and try and do this," but I've always gone with a climbing partner when I've had climbing trips, and that's, like, this super crucial ingredient towards success is, like, someone that you've climbed with before that you trust because 'cause you're literally entrusting your life into someone else's hands. And so when I got to Canada, I just met and climbed with a bunch of incredible friends, including Mike Doyle, who is someone who I had known for over a decade, who used to be the Canadian climbing team coach, and we had very much so like built this dynamic and relationship climbing together that was amazing. But leaning into that, I realized, I don't need to be held back by someone bailing out on me, or I need to have my success attributed to a man being present. So much in climbing is like very subjective, to be honest. Like, even our grading scale, it's whatever the consensus becomes, and as soon as a woman does a climb, like, it can be just, like, downgraded by one man, and that becomes, like, the way that the climb is. There's so much that's kinda, like, wildly packed into the sport, but I wanted to start assembling, like, all-female teams so that no success of ours could be attributed to some male being present, and you kind of see that evolution in the film as well as the book. I write more extensively about it, but just that transition towards building all female teams, and now I kind of look at both, like going on an expedition with an all female team, though also being open to climbing with the amazing male climbing partners I do have. It's just like having the right partner, I think, is the most important aspect.
And how do you find and choose the right partner?
I think you learn over the course of it. And when I was building my business, I was like, I want to hire the people that are best for the job. Similar in building an expedition, I want to align with like the best climbing partner that I can have. And whether that's a female or a male, ideally it's just like a really great dynamic. And so in building a team, normally now I really like to be very transparent over like, what are the intentions? What does success look like to you? What does good look like to you? Um, how are we going to communicate if this goes wrong, if this goes wrong, if this goes wrong, if everything goes wrong? And some of those decisions you can't outline because you don't even know, like when you're going into a big unknown trip. Cedar has this line in the film of like the amount of things that can go wrong are infinite, and it's totally true. But I think that as long as you have that baked in transparency of communication, then you can really navigate a lot with the right climbing partner.
I can imagine. And you also said in this documentary that at some point I felt like you didn't grow up being a natural team player. So how difficult is it for you now to switch? Because obviously you want the best team for these ambitious expeditions you're doing.
It's hard, it's sometimes things come very naturally on a team that is, I would say, like the natural right fit. And then sometimes, like in Sao Tome, I can feel really held back because I'm not in line with what the desires of my teammates are, but I need to accept them. And I think the Sao Tome expedition happened in 2019, and since then I've had a few years and experiences to really like mature and learn from those experiences. But something that I know about myself is I respond emotionally immediately, and then I let logic seep in when I allow myself to have that like breathing room. And that's so important, like both in business and performance and in every aspect of life, right? Like we can't just act emotionally. And so learning more about myself and the way in which I'm going to confront and maybe some of our listeners as well have these patterns, but when you're given the word like no, or you can't do this, or like the expedition's over and you're like, wow, I just trained my entire last half year and prepared and really piled in all of this energy and resources into making this happen. The single word no can come as like a lot of friction and like a dagger to your heart. But I think that where I take just time to process is like, let me absorb this, let me like think about it, let me think about like the best case scenario for the people that are all a part of this. And in a high stakes scenario like what happened to us in the little island country in Africa, like I can't force people outside of their comfort zones either. And so I think that that's like this super crucial aspect of a dynamic and of being a team player that um really comes down to aligning with the right teammates too. Like, could the situation have been different with a different team? Probably, but you also never know. And so you can just kind of learn from those experiences and continue to like build better for the future.
It takes a lot of self-awareness to do what you just said, basically, to like analyze that you're emotional in the situation, and then have to, take, I really like the word, or the term you used, breathing space, to let it sink in, and then act out of reason. How did you get to that point? Is that something that just happened over time, or is that something, again, that you achieved with your mental coach team?
During my time off from climbing, I got to spend a lot of time reflecting. And also something that I'm still working on. Like I'm so far from knowing and operating perfectly in my day-to-day life, in my relationships, in my sport, though I'm just trying to improve on all fronts. When I was writing my book, I had this very therapeutic experience because I was going through these memories that I hadn't necessarily like visited in say 20 years or more. And turning over these stones and analyzing these relationships and dynamics and foundational behaviors that I came to kind of absorb into being a part of me. And so going back and writing about them was kind of like this live therapeutic process for myself to further understand the way that I interact and react to certain situations, which did help me a lot. And I would say like 99% of what I wrote never saw the light of the page. Just because I journal a lot. It's the way that I process through emotions. And we always learn from like not only our mistakes but our most challenging times, and I think that that's what I like to remember when I go through really tough periods of life too. It's like this is going to probably shape me more than a championship victory could.
Hmm. Yeah, I was just about to say, though, you just speaking or talking about your book kind of sounded like publicly journaling, which is a terrifying thought for myself.
It is in a way like you're putting your most vulnerable authentic self on the page for others to read and scrutinize and analyze and sometimes never meet you but know your story. And that I think is a part of the compartmentalization that I had to do with the film, as well as like this film's going to come out and I want it to be as vulnerable and candid and real because I think that we're missing that. I certainly am in my own feed. I know we all create our own feeds as well, of like an echo chamber, but when you just see the gloss, you don't see the humanity, and you don't see like that connective point of vulnerability and people really expressing like where they're at. And I think that what I just have tried to do on my own pages, but as well in the film, was like go to the heart of the real issues of like what defines us beyond athletes, but also just as humans. And that universal struggle of like, we all go through extreme obstacles. We all go through challenging times, and we go through these experiences that we don't know how to even like emerge from. Like the future feels very uncertain when you go through a injury. Like when I had a pool of doctors telling me I may never climb nor professionally climb again, and that's so baked into my identity. It's like, where do you go? Where do you start? And I think that a lot of where you starts in the mind.
Definitely. Everything, I guess, starts in the mind, right? And I mean, it's so honorable of you saying it like that, trying to make this film about yourself as candid and vulnerable as possible. And I mean, that's how maybe young girls can, dream about a life for themselves the way that you're living it. And that's how role models are built. And yet it's such a scary thing. And I can imagine that it's even scarier doing it as a woman, and especially you living a very, public life, having faced criticism as well. How has, the backlash you've faced over the years never held you back of still showing your full and honest and raw self?
Um, I'm not like bulletproof, first of all. And that's, I think that it's something really important for us all to remember, because you don't see the personal struggle as much in even the people that we really love. Like, you may not know always what they're going through. And for instance, the film touches on this moment, and I call it a moment. It was really like many years of harassment that I endured with another, who happened to be another climber. And it got to this boiling point that it was like, I need to stand up for myself to make this stop. And I think that cyberbullying is a serious issue right now as well. It's like, we live in a connected but disconnected world in which we're commenting or trolling other people's social profiles, yet there's always a human on the other side. And that devastation that can happen on the inside of that human is really drastic. And it's moments like that where I choose to stand up for myself and others, and go through this really crucifying time of like having other people's opinions who are totally unaware of, the context of which the situation arrived to. And you have to kind of turn off that public commentary sometimes of just like, you know, people are going to have opinions of me, and I'm probably going to meet maybe like 5% of those people. And I hope that I can meet more, because I think that like connecting and being able to have conversations with each other is incredibly important. But there's also a point at which you need to stop living for other people and start living for yourself. And when you can break through that point, and not to say that I've totally done that, you can really focus on your own goals and your own drive, and the people who are in your day-to-day life, sorry, that you listen to, and that you allow opinions count. Because you could have a lot of opinions, and if you absorb every single one of them, you're going to feel quite lost.
Definitely. And I definitely want to know what's next for you. You have over 30 first female ascents to your name yet, regardless of what anyone says. Maybe you can share with us why these are important to you and what the next 30 first female ascents will be.
Sure. Well, first of all, I think that first female ascents are really important to acknowledge, because it's a part of the history of our sport. And when a woman does something of significance, and it's an achievement that's like the first woman to do something, I think that it's worth noting because it's historical. It chronicles the progression of women in our sport, which is, by the way, like such an incredible sport in which women have the utmost ability to reach parity in performance as men. Like climbing is a very beyond the physical, combines the mental, combines this like creative balance and ownership over your own technique and experience that really convolutes into this like masterpiece of performance that women can output just the same as men. And so I'm really excited to just continue to explore my limits. I have a climb that I'm working on El Cap in Yosemite, and um is still kind of in that like exploratory phase of, is this my next big project? What does my next big project look like? I also have a climb that I'm going to in Croatia at the end of August. And so there's kind of excitement on the physical sense of like, as an athlete, I'm always driven by my next goals, and that's what keeps me accountable and motivated in my training. But I'm also excited to just continue to own and craft my voice in the sport as hopefully a leader for some young girls and women alike, that I look up to the women that came before me, like Lynn Hill and Robin Herbesfield, Angie Ida, like to name just 10 off the top of my mind would be so easy and not do justice to all the others. But I was so inspired by them. And I have my career because of the women that came before me. And so if I can help use, a portion of my voice and provide a fraction of that inspiration for some other young girl out there, like, then I feel really happy with the job that I've done.
And that is the perfect end to this episode, Sasha. Thank you so much for inspiring. Keep pushing, keep being the role model that you are, especially for the young girls and the next generation of rock climbers out there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks again to Sasha. This was really an incredible episode. And what stuck out for me really was how clear and straightforward she was about everything, or, pushing through those hip struggles while being on the wall. That really impressed me so much. And guys, if anything impressed you as well, we would love to hear about it. So please make sure to reach out and share your experiences with us. You can either do so by leaving a review or comment on whatever platform you're watching or listening, or shoot us an email on mindsetwin@redbull.com. And this season you can watch on YouTube as well, so go and check out our Mindset Win YouTube channel. And thanks again for listening. See you next time.